My name is Sanford Swanson. I know it's hard to believe with this baby face, but for 18 and a half years, I've been a police officer. And currently for the last 8.5 years, I've landed in West Lafayette, Indiana, where I get the privilege to raise my family alongside my wife. Brian, I appreciate your story. We don't have enough time in the day to take the wild ride that my life is. But there's a lot of intersection between the things that Brian talked about and what I plan to talk about today, and so I appreciate that. Didn't meet Brian until I walked in here at 6:45 this morning, and so it's interesting to see how the intersection between two complete strangers can happen on a whim. One of the things that really resonated with me, and I talked to Steve about the table, is the fact that for half my life, I'm 43 years old, and for half my life, I've been the guy who said, I want to be known as the person who, when he walks in the room, someone says, there's something different about that guy, right? Something different about him. And then hopefully they have the bravery to come to that person and say, hey man, I noticed there's something unique about you. What is it? And what brings you there? And then we have the courage to then share our testimony, share our story, to be able to bring light to the Lord in those moments. Working for the government, I often don't get an opportunity to preach and profess the way I would want to, but I can tell you, over the last 18 years, I've had people handcuffed in the seat next to me, and I've invited them to church. And so when I see the opportunity, I take the opportunity, because when God opens the door, and he's shown me this a few different times, especially with Swan Lives, say, hey, you asked me for this thing, now do something with it, right? And so when he provides that opportunity, I try to take that. So I'm gonna stop off of that because I'm gonna get into some type of a sermon, and that's not why we're here, okay? So I created a PowerPoint. I like illustrations and things to get your mind jogged. And so we thought about buyer's remorse, right? And so I'm gonna share a little bit about the last year or so of my life and kind of how it intersects between my professional life plus my business life. A friend of mine calls me a serial entrepreneur. And it's hilarious and accurate at the same time. I was just on vacation for the last few days with my wife and our best friends. And as we were sitting around brunch the other day, a business idea was coming to mind. And my buddy was like, you're gonna leave here with a business plan, aren't you? And I said, yeah, you're right. So I entitled it Grit That Leads to Buyer's Remorse, so we'll get into it. So this is a Christian business breakfast, which means there's a lot of business folks, either owners, entrepreneurs, or at least business-minded people in the room. As we know, the machine of business is an interesting beast. There's a lot of good and a lot of bad that can come from business, and the difference is how we manage those things and how we compartmentalize them. The bad. Business can be a large source of stress. Right? There's a lot that goes into it. How am I paying the bills? Do I get clients in here? Who is my client? Do I create how do I create market share? Things of that nature. How do I compete? And I personally don't believe in competition. I believe in doing your thing and doing it well, and people will come alongside you. Whether you're a mechanic, a roofer, or you have portable restroom trailers, there's enough market share for everyone. But how you do your thing is what will set you apart. In my business plan to the bank, they said, how are you gonna be separate from your competition? And I told them, I said, the customer experience. The customer experience is what will set them apart and make them wanna come back, because they will feel like they are one of one when they're dealing with Swan Lives. 2, business can literally, physically and emotionally destroy a part of you. Done well or done wrong, we can literally give a part of ourselves to business and leave it on the table, right? I would venture to say most of us have been there. We go home at the end of the day, we're downtrodden, we feel beat up, and really just kind of like we talked about, I don't remember any part of the day, right? How did I get here? And that's a terrible sinking feeling to have, but business has the ability to make us feel that way. And business can, and oftentimes is largely fueled by financial gain. At the end of the day, it's the P&L, it's the spreadsheet, how much money can I make, how much can I bring to the table? And I think that's a very dangerous place to be. For me, business is about relationships, and once you build relationships, the money will come. But if we're chasing the almighty dollar, oftentimes we find ourselves in a really precarious situation. And a lot of times, once we got a taste of that apple, it's hard to put it down. But there is some good. Done properly, business can provide us with financial stability and abundance. And abundance doesn't have to mean millions of dollars in the bank. What is abundant for you may not be the same thing that's abundant for me. I'm a father and a husband. I've got 2 teenage girls, God bless me, right? I've got 2 teenage girls at home, and so the abundance for me is giving them everything that they need and showing them a life and a way of life that will set them up for success when they leave our home. Done well. Business affords us to do what God has ordained in us. It allows us to walk in our purpose. And for me, that is one of the most important things that can ever get out of any transaction, be it business, be it relational, or what have you. Talking about relationships, I mentioned this already. Business can and oftentimes does evolve into many amazing relationships. And I honestly have this conversation multiple times a week. When I'm having discussions, hey, can I get a quote? Can we talk about money? What does this cost? I say, hey, let's take a step back from the money and let's talk about the relationship, right? Are we talking about a one and done? Because I have a one and done price, but also have a price that talks about the relationship, right? If we're gonna be in business together for a while, I'm not gonna charge you what the market rate is. I'm actually have an opportunity to walk that back so that we can be in relationship with each other, and so we can grow each other's businesses, grow each other's events, or whatever the spheres that we're working in. Rise from grit. So for the last several years, I've had several mottos, but one of the ones that stick out, and I've been trying to teach this to my kids as well, is doing things for one of 2 reasons: because I have to do it, and because I want to do it. This is one of those intersections, right? Brian made his life choices because he had to. It was a matter of life and death, right? So I asked myself, my wife came to me and she basically told me, you've got to say yes less. I'm a guy who loves trying to help make things better. And if I can help improve something, I take that as a challenge, and I want to seize that challenge. I love a good challenge. What I don't want to challenge is I don't want to challenge my wife. I don't want to challenge my marriage, right? And I certainly don't want to challenge God. And so I had to come up with a metric that allowed me to filter out the things that deserve a yes and the things that deserve a no. And so I came up with have to, want to. Do I have to do it? Is this something that I absolutely have to do? I have to go to work. I have to keep the lights on. I have to keep a roof over my family's head. I still enjoy what I do, but that is more of in the needs to category versus the wants to, right? Speaking of want to, do I want to do it? And if I do want to do it, it must bring me joy. I am no longer in the business of running around and doing things simply because someone asked me to, or it'll look good on a resume, or I think maybe it'll make me look good. I do it because I want to do it. One of the greatest joys I get is through my business survival training solutions. I get to mentor middle school age young men. I literally go into the schools. The schools first hour of the day, I get to have them for the first thing. They grab breakfast, they come to me in the classroom, and I give them life skills. It's called standing as gentlemen. And when I was laying on the couch one day and going, man, I feel really good about my life, but how did I get here, right? Lots of twists and turns and a lot of self-figuring out, right? But what I realized was I had a few good men who I could relate to who were not my father, were not men who were not relatives in my life, that I could say, this person was a great influence. This person was a great influence. And these are the influences I received from them. And so I asked myself, what are you willing to do about it? The answer was to pay that forward. And that's why I get to go into schools and I can spend time with them. And it's one of the most fulfilling things. I'm kind of getting off track, but just real quick, just last month, we finished up our last session. And the last thing we do before we celebrate, we have mock interviews. Because these young men, aren't used to getting in front of strangers and being challenged. And so I have them, a 3-person panel, ask them questions about a mock job we talked about. It's not really a mock job because I'm actually interviewing them for Swan Lobs. And so I asked, the whole time we say, hey, what if you had a job interview for $50 an hour? And these 13, 14, 50 was like, $50 an hour? That's a lot of money, right? And it is. It's not a little bit of money, but talking about $106,000 a year for a job. And I put that in their mindset. I have them frame that in their mind. And through these interviews, one of the interviewers asked them, said, hey, who is someone who has influenced you? And they could mention anyone in the world, right? And about 5 of them chose me as a person who's an influence. And talk about feeling like you're moving in your purpose, right? When these young men could name their parents, their grandparents, their teachers, someone they spend way more than an hour and a half a week with, but they mentioned my name in that space. I can't tell you, I'd be lying if I didn't say I welled up, right? I was the amount of emotion and purpose driven in that moment, how purpose driven I felt in that moment was amazing. And that's certainly in the want to category. I don't have to be there, but I want to be there. And when I can't be there, I feel terrible about it, right? And so I make it up to them, and so that's where we are. So this is the same message I've been giving to my kids for the last couple of years. Again, I have teenagers. My oldest is almost 17. She's driving, right? And she's doing sports, and she's got her first boyfriend. And I haven't. I'm not gonna incriminate myself, all right? So, yeah, moving right along, exactly. But as we're talking about time management and being good and proficient at things, whatever you're doing needs to bring you joy. My middle child this year said, I want to play basketball. And my response was, really? And not that she can't play, she's just not very good, right? And so she's in middle school now. And middle school's different. We're not talking about a rec league or anything like that. One, we're talking about practices and games 5 days a week. There's a commitment here. And I'm a fan of, if you're gonna do it, be good at it, right? Otherwise, take that energy and spend it on something else, right? What's your return on investment? Her return on investment in basketball is not very high, right? I didn't tell her that, be a good dad, but I looked at my wife and I go, what's going on here, right? Fast forward, tryouts come along. The day before tryouts, Mom, Dad, I actually don't want to play. Okay, dear, why? What happened? I figured you guys wanted me to play. Oh, no. We don't do this in that family, right? I am not living vicariously through any of you. I have lived and continue to live my life, and I want you to carve out a path that it is your own. And so I set this up because I'm gonna tell you a significant event in my life here in just a second. So that's the message I've been given I've been trying to live by that myself, but also spreading that message to my kids because I don't want to be a hypocrite. So in November, I was promoted to the rank of lieutenant within the police department. Currently, I'm a sergeant. In November, I accepted the promotion, and what it looked like, it was shiny, right? Glitz and glamour, high fives. It was a personal accomplishment. Every time you move up in an organization, there's a sense of accomplishment when you move up. And it was a measure of success, right? One of 5 lieutenants within the police department. So kind of top 10%, if you will. But what it looks like is not always what we envision. What it felt like, it was lonely. It was exhausting. And quite honestly, for me, in the way it was framed, it was unfulfilling. A little backstory. So, at least within our department, every shift has a lieutenant and a sergeant. It's kind of, if you think of captain, co-captain, lieutenant's a captain, sergeant's a co-captain. Lieutenant gets an opportunity to mentor the sergeant, build them up, and make them ready to make that leap at some point within their career. Shortly after I got promoted, I got a text message from my sergeant that says, can I tell you something? Right? So I immediately picked up the phone and called. What's up? That's not a good segue into a healthy conversation. I'm pregnant. Pause. Congratulations. That's great for you, right? I'm on light duty and I'm going to days. Okay. Meanwhile, I don't have a sergeant. And so the way that the organization decided to deal with it or treat it was just ride it out until she gets back from maternity leave. She just had her baby last week. So that was 7 months ago. And so for 6 months, I was by myself. I was doing the work of two people. I work 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. And so at 2 o'clock in the morning, when I need to bounce something off somebody, there's no one to bounce anything off of. That's where the lonely came in. It was exhausting, because like I said, I'm doing the job of two people. And so I had to create a have to and need to list. I have to get this, have to and want to list. I have to get this done. This needs to get done. I want to get this done, but everything on this list needs to get done first. And the wants to list was never completed, ever. And so that's where I was exhausting. It hit me once I took work home. I had to take payroll home one day. It was on a Saturday. I'm sitting on the couch, family's in bed, and I'm sitting here watching TV and doing payroll at the same time, and I've never done that. In 18 years, or 6 years of a supervisor, I've never taken payroll home. So as you can see, and it was exhausting, but the unfulfilling part was, I got to thinking back and I go, man, for the last 6 months, I can't think of one day where this position has brought me joy. And so I looked at myself and said, right now you're being a hypocrite. You're telling your kids, don't do things just to do things. Don't go through the motions. If this isn't bringing you joy, then why are you doing it? So I had to ask myself that very raw and real question. And so I talked to my wife, I talked to God, I prayed, and I went to my boss, went to the chief and said, can I have a conversation, can I take a meeting with you? And in that meeting, I made the bold move. I don't want it anymore. And I gave it back. And in business and policing, a lot of times, so, I'm on a SWAT team. And so we talk about taking that tactical ground. And once you've gained that ground, you maintain it, right? Once you take it, you own it, it's yours. But we also have what we call a tactical retreat, where we make the decision that it makes sense to step back, give it back to them because it makes sense for us. And that was a tactical retreat for me. I needed to. It was beginning to spill into home, which is a no-no, right? My wife and I have done an amazing job over the last 18 years of making sure that work stays at work and home stays at home. But work was coming home, and that's a problem, right? It's negatively impacting my home, and that was a problem for me. In business, we often hesitate to step back. So why did I? I didn't have to have that position. I didn't want to have that position any longer. What are we doing? Do we like it? Do I like what I'm doing? Do I enjoy what I'm doing? Because those aren't the same thing. Do I like what I'm doing? Do I enjoy what I'm doing? Are we moving in our purpose? God has ordained us to do so many amazing things in life, but are we moving in that purpose? Or are we just on cruise control? Have we established healthy boundaries in what it is that we're doing? But most importantly, are we respecting those boundaries that we've set? What does Scripture tell us? Boundaries, Proverbs 4:23. Keep vigilant, watch over your heart. That's where life starts. Genesis 2:16. You are free to eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat from it, you will certainly die. There's our first recorded buyer's remorse in Genesis. The fruit. When the women saw the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. But the Lord called to the man, "Where are you?" He answered, "I heard you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid. So we've got our boundaries, we've got our buyer's remorse, and then we got our mask. We're hiding behind, oftentimes, our work and our business. How many times have our relationships suffered because of business and work, right? Long hours. Oh, this is important. I need to do this. You know what's also important? Our home, our families, our wives, our children, our husbands. Here's my last slide, reflecting on, and I know it's kind of a race to the finish line. I want to make sure I respect everyone's time because this is a business day for most of us. But reflections and calls to action. Be careful about being blinded. If not careful, we will work so hard that we will allow our grit to betray us. We'll grind until it's raw and there's nothing left, including the people who are most important to us, who have supported us, because we can turn around and they can be gone because we've worked so hard, we forgot to bring them along for the ride and make sure they were comfortable. Business decisions. Do I feel compromised? When we're making those business decisions, do you feel compromised? Are you moving in your purpose? Do you have to do the things that you're doing, or do you want to do the things that you're doing? It's a great place to be in. So when I built this business, obviously I still work full time, and so this business is built so that I cannot take a client all year and I could still pay for the business. Terrible business model. Don't encourage it. Don't plan on doing it. However, what it does afford me is the opportunity to be choosy about how I do business and who I do business with. If an organization does not align with my moral and ethical compass, I have the opportunity to walk away from that business. I know everyone's not in the same boat, but am I compromising myself? Am I moving in my purpose? And do I have to do this business with this person? Do I want to do business with this person? You talk about the phone rings, you see the client, you go, oh, right? If that's your response every time that client calls, it's probably a relationship you should probably get out of, right? But society says maintain your ground. Whatever you've done, keep doing it. It's working. Is it though? That's the question. Is what you're doing working? I can't answer that from anyone in the room but myself. But we should be asking ourselves that consistently to make sure that we stay in yoke with who we are, maintaining those boundaries and respecting those boundaries personally. Trust that God's got it. Isaiah 43:18. But forget all that. It is nothing compared to what I'm going to do. And my life verse, Romans 8:28. For we know that all things work together for good for those who love God, who are the called according to his purpose. Right? I use this illustration of an eagle because if smaller birds of flight will land on the back of an eagle, normally if we get a fly on us, we're flicking and trying to get bugs off of us. We don't want to be bothered, right? Eagle doesn't do any of that. Eagle continues to soar, continues to fly. But what the eagle does is the eagle ascends and keeps flying higher and higher because he or she knows that once that air gets thin, that smaller bird of prey can't handle the thin air and eventually will fly off and the eagle can go about their business. And that's kind of how I try to live my life. My wife has come to me and she can't believe how, and Steve and I were talking about this, she can't believe how unbothered I seem. The world seems to be on fire and I'm good, just moving around, right? She wants to be armed to the teeth and put on boxing gloves and do whatever she can to support her man. And I'm good. Don't worry about it. We're good. I'm good. Everybody's checking in. You good? You good? Because a police officer giving back a promotion, almost unheard of, right? What happened? There's some things that happened, but we're good, right? There's not this huge scandal to be had. I know everyone's looking for that juicy story. There's no juicy story here. I just made a decision that was in the best interest of me, in the best interest of my family, and I'm good, and I'm happy with it, right? So that's my time. So when making business decisions, business dealings, please remember that if you take nothing else, make sure you have to do it. And if you don't have to do it, make sure you want to do it. And if you do want to do it, please, 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 make sure it brings you joy.